Good morning, everyone. Today, we're going to explore a crisis that is no longer just a headline, but a harsh reality for millions. As the world's most populous nation, India stands at a crossroads of rapid industrial growth and devastating environmental shifts. From submerged coastlines to struggling farmers, we will dive into the complex story of climate refugees in India and understand why this is a global challenge we can no longer ignore. Before discussing climate change in India, let's first understand the concepts of climate refugees and climate change. The World Economic Forum suggests that the term climate refugees was first coined to describe the increasing large-scale migration and cross-border mass movement of people that were partly caused by such weather-related disasters. In April, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, known as UNHCR, released data showing that the number of people displaced by climate change related disasters since 2010 has risen to 21.5 million, pointing out that in addition to sudden disasters, climate change is a complex cause of food and water shortages, as well as difficulties in accessing natural resources. Sea level rise is another threat. Over the past 30 years, the number of people living in coastal areas at high risk of rising sea levels has increased from 160 million to 260 million, 90% of whom are from poor developing countries and small island states. For example, in Bangladesh, it is predicted that 17% of the country will be submerged by the rise in sea level by 2050, and 20 million people living there will lose their homes. According to the report from the Internal Displacement Monitoring Center, in 2025, typhoons and floods struck China, India, and the Philippines, while wildfires swept across the northern hemisphere, from the United States to Korea, Spain, and Greece. Meanwhile, earthquakes in Myanmar and Afghanistan added to the needs and vulnerabilities of those already displaced by conflict. These events remind us that no nation, not even the wealthiest, is immune to disaster displacement. The impacts of natural disasters, however, are not evenly felt. People with fewer financial resources living in inadequate housing or with limited access to social protection are are disproportionately affected and often face greater barriers to return, rebuild, and recover. This inequality comes with increased risks of prolonged displacement following disasters. Okay, now we finally arrive at the main point of our topic: India. India's performance on SDG 15, Life on Land, faces significant challenges, with progress stagnating in recent years. Concerning 27.77% of India's total land area is degraded, which is more than five times than the 2030 target of 5.46%. Furthermore, only 0.4% of the country's total geographical area is covered under afforestation schemes, far below the 1.38% target for 2030's total. In addition, India has seen a 1.5% increase in area under desertification since the last assessment in 2020 to 2021, highlighting the growing threat to land health and ecosystems. Having learned about India's current progress toward its sustainable development goals, the question is, why is India facing the major problem of climate refugees and the development difficulties of the SDGs? Here are main reasons. India's greenhouse gas emissions reached their highest global share, about 7.8% since 1970. More worryingly, the rate of emissions growth has accelerated in recent years, rising by nearly 1 percentage point between 2020 and 2023 alone, stated by State of India's Environment in Figures 2025. Forest diversions for development reached a decade high last year, with 29,000 hectares cleared, mostly in states like Jharkhand and Uttar Pradesh, the report stated. While environmental governance varies across states, they all face challenges to varying degrees, including extreme weather, deteriorating public health, stagnant infrastructure, and increasing economic pressure. India is under pressure to mitigate climate change by controlling emission growth, but it will also need to adapt to increased water scarcity, droughts, floods, cyclones, and other natural disasters. The country has developed a fairly good disaster management system, but it needs more resources to develop further. Next, let's talk about the background factors that have exacerbated climate change. India's agricultural sector is the primary source of livelihood for approximately 58% of its population and is the country's largest employer. India is also one of the world's leading agricultural producers, exporting a wide variety of agricultural products, including basmati rice, wheat, cereals, spices, fresh fruits, dried fruits, cotton, tea, coffee, dairy products, and other cash crops. Furthermore, India is the world's fourth largest automobile manufacturer and one of the world's fastest growing e-commerce markets. The mining sector contributes 11% to India's industrial GDP and 2.5% to its GDP. India is the world's second-largest steel producer, second-largest coal producer, second-largest cement producer, and third-largest electricity generator. Due to its history of British colonization, India's original economic system was a colonial economy, heavily reliant on the export of cash crops to sustain the nation. During the colonial period, India developed basic transportation infrastructure for transporting raw materials and products, which developed rapidly after independence. In modern times, it has developed outsourcing services and some manufacturing industries, essential components of the global division of labor. However, due to uneven infrastructure development and the influence of the colonial economy on its industries, India's economic development has been hampered by insufficient development of basic necessities and limited by the influence of multinational corporations and capital. While India's economy has gradually improved on the international stage, the development of various industries has exacerbated environmental pollution and contributed to regional climate change. To deal with the inevitable impact from the climate change, local Indian farmers use gadgets to monitor the crops and water level in order to not only more precisely measure the micro circumstances of the farming environment, but also reduce the cost they may be used for preventing harvest loss. The economist from International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center also suggests that climate change would impact the amount of crop yield, and it would subsequently impact the price of the crop and the pressure from the consumers. The government would have to bring in additional subsidies to ease the economic and agricultural burden. Due to climate change and the rise of commodity prices, traditional ports are facing the stress from a reduction of seafood production. The traditional fishing community is finding ways, including cooperation with new built ports, using online websites for sales and management to make ends meet with their familiar career. In addition, some villages in remote areas have been affected by reduced rainfall due to climate change and have had to build alternative water storage facilities for water resources and irrigation. As for public opinion, India youth are increasingly concerned about climate change. Down to Earth, known as DTE, conducted a survey in the October to November 2025 period among 300 people aged 16 to 25 years. Nearly 88% of the respondents say they felt the climate is changing around them. 67% say these changes were already affecting their daily lives and lifestyles. Furthermore, some youth are angry. There are waves of protests sweeping the world, and the protesters are predominantly young, while the reasons range from regime change to inflation. A survey by Center for Science and Environment, known as CSE, and Down to Earth magazine finds eco-anxiety is apparently increasing among the youth. They are also protesting the increasing degradation of environment and natural resources and the world's laxity in combating climate change, says Richard Mahapatra, managing editor of Down to Earth. From a news reported in 2024, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that India has reassured the world about climate action by becoming the only G20 nation to achieve nationally determined contributors under the Paris Agreement, which marked the beginning of a shift towards it, much ahead of the deadline. He called climate change a huge worry for the global community and said India was addressing it through proactive actions, not just words. Modi said electric vehicles are in demand and India is working on making a green hydrogen mission global hub. He said, "It is being implemented with great speed. We are trying to move towards renewable energy. This will help us address climate change, but it will also create huge opportunities for green jobs. We wish to seize that opportunity." In conclusion, the issue of climate refugees in India is a mirror reflecting the global inequality of environmental impact, while the youth are rising in eco-anxiety and the government is pushing for green energy transitions. The road ahead remains steep. India's story tells us that sustainable development is not just about numbers or targets, it is about human dignity and survival. As we witness the displacement of millions, the question remains, will we act fast enough to protect our shared future on this planet? It's such a good question, and I hope all of us can think about this question and do our best to protect our environment. And these are my presentation. Thanks for your listening, and I hope that all of us can have a better environment in the future.